Hello, good evening. Welcome to another edition of your favorite current affairs program on television, The Point of View. My name is Duke Mensopoko, sitting in for your regular host, Bernard Kokuavle. The program in this edition promises to be very exciting, have a very, very dynamic, larger-than-life personality, has knowledge and expertise cuts across politics, sports, engineering, what have you, and is a man who's not new to our body politic, knows a lot about Ghana, a country he deeply loves. We'll be getting into a discussion with my guest. When I come back, I'll introduce him. Stay with us. You're welcome back from the break. My guest this edition is Kwabena Agyepong. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Duke.
I hear a lot of your contemporaries and friends refer to you as Kala or Kalahari.
Kalahari Desert.
Kalahari Desert.
Well, you know, when you go to secondary school, they always try to find you a nickname, and every one of us used to have one.
Yeah.
And Kalahari Desert, and that was my name, so they cut it short, Kala.
Oh, I see.
So
Interesting. Yes, because when this was advertised, a lot of people, I had people write that happens to be your nickname. And this you must have had this in Infant Spim School.
Infant Spim School, yes, in Form 1. Two notorious friends of mine. One is in America, one is still here. I'm sure you've heard of T.D. Brodiments.
Yes.
Brodiments, I think he was an actor in Ghana, and then Robert Daniels, who's around, my mate in Lockhart Schweizer Lower Dormitory. And they coined that for me.
Interesting. But your name, Kwabena Agyepong, that takes us back to some form of history.
That's right.
And coming back on the recent marking of the Martyrs' Day.
That's right.
Especially for students of the law, they would read an important case like Tufo, an Attorney General, and would have justice on that panel as the High Court judge among the Court of Appeal judges.
That's right.
who was on it. It's just for clarification, is there any link, or what's got to do with family?
That brings me a lot of pride. I mean, for my dad, who had then been on the judiciary not for too long, but to be selected as the only High Court judge, to be part of appeal court judges. In fact, it was a transitional Supreme Court, and being given the honor to read the judgment, and I was very thrilled about that. I'm proud about that, and of course, we all know that unfortunately his stay on the bench was curtailed, and as you said, not quite long ago in June, we celebrated 40 years of his passing with his colleagues. And it's been a journey of 40 years. I mean,
what manner of man was he, and how was growing up like for you? Was this to be in Kumasi?
That's right. I was born in Kumasi, Krofrom. We used to call the hospital G, now Konfanochi Teaching Hospital. You know, and he was a young lawyer then who had just returned from UK in 1961, and I was born Independence Day, 1962. And that's where his practice was, in Kumasi, with his lifelong friend, Amankwa. So they had Agyepong and Amankwa. And they started with Lawyer Mankwetia, one of those old legends of law in Ghana. And he practiced there for a long while before being attracted to the bench by the then Chief Justice Apelu. My father was a very calm person, very measured. I mean, if you look at his background, he used to tell me a lot of history about how he grew up. He was born in Oyoko. Those of you know Efijase in Kumeu, that area. And he used to walk to school at Asokore. That was the only decent Methodist school, LA, in those days, with the likes of Professor Edubu Ahene. And, Edubu Ahene was a bit senior. He was used to do all walking to school. And so he went to Infant Spim. Unfortunately, I mean, he was a brilliant student, and the Methodist Church offered him a slot at Infant Spim.
Wow.
So, and I remember because of that, he ensured that I went to Infant Spim school.
Family tradition.
So it's become about 3 generations. My son has also ended up going to Infant Spim school. I quite remember when I was going to at the time we were going to have a common entrance. my teacher, Mr. J. Mensah, at that time I was at Royal International School in Kumasi. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's gone defunct a bit now, the school, one of the great schools in those days. And they in those days, the teachers, they were in awe of the big schools in Accra and Cape Coast. So they penciled Opoku for me.
So just nearby in Santasi.
That's right. So
you would have had a school number by now.
That's right.
Anyway, yeah.
So I sent the forms back home, and my father was livid. He drove with me to school and said, "I've got to go to Infant Supreme School." Oh. Fortunately, I did very well. I come in and topped the school in those days, one of the highest marks in Ghana, and ended up in Infant Supreme. And he taught me to have my feet on the ground. He was a very modest person, and you know, in those days when you are young, when you're going to school, you want provisions and that kind of thing. And he'll look at your face in a stern manner and tell you that he never even went to school with shoes on in those days. You know, barefooted in secondary school in the 40s, you know. So the provisions that you want, he may only give you half. You know, he was a very stern father, but he was very modest, and I would say that my life has been structured on the values that he imbibed in me.
If you look at what the judiciary in those days stood for, I mean,
that's right.
And the judiciary now, would you say there's been any change, especially even from how citizens looked at judges, and especially and now
we have a national problem. You know, not only the judiciary. There's a general draining of confidence in the governance architecture, which is something that we have to deal with as nationals of our country, as patriots, as leaders of the country, as citizens of the country. Judges were held in very high esteem. There were not that many anyway at the time, and those were the days of the military dictatorship. That was in a Champon's time, and there was no Supreme Court because there was no democracy. And the appeal court had only a few very eminent judges, Sani Jage, Francois, Archer, you know, Ducey, Antechi, Kinsley Nina, you know, those were the appeal court judges, and he was with Aban, Ampere, those were the high court judges, Apatu Plange, you know, so it's, and then of course Poku Sarkodie, Cecilia Krantiado, you know, so I can't draw a comparison. I was a bit of a kid at the time, but I used to enjoy going to court with him. So I'll sit in a lot of his court cases. He used to sit at the Ghana Law School, that building. That's where his office and his chambers was in those days. And then he was moved to State House, where the Speaker's office is. He used to be a high court. You know, that's where he used to sit. And I quite remember, strangely, in 1979, this Legon student, Ajay Berima, you know, he was shot by the police at this railway station, which is very close to where we are. Accra railway station, railway shooting incident. Commonwealth students were on demonstration, one of those demonstrations during the military rule, and a policeman shot Ajay Berima, and he happened to be the chairman of the committee of inquiry. You know, so the Japan committee. I think the others were Mr. Amui and A.A. Dade, who used to be headmaster of Kwabena and then later Achimota School. You know, so he had no time for materialism. I mean, that's what I learned from him. Very modest, very disciplined, and we became very close because I was the first son, the two elder sisters. You know, but I was the one. He would tell me stories about the World War when they were in Form 5 and the history of Ghana, and he loved football.
It's curious you didn't become a lawyer yourself. I mean, it's following him sitting in court, watching arguments from lawyers.
Strangely, I mean, these things happen. I mean, I remember he wanted me to be a doctor.
And for many people, when they listen to you, I mean, before you do your background search or even read, many presume you're a lawyer, especially in the days when you were press secretary for President Kufuor.
That's right. And also because I blossomed onto the Ghanaian stage quite early as a 25-year-old hosting sports highlights on national television at the time when there was only one network in Ghana, Ghana Broadcasting Television. So as a young 25-year-old at the time, I was a lot more handsome than now.
You still...
You know, so, and, you know, people just felt I was a lawyer because of my father's background. But I'm proud to be a civil engineer. Went to that time we used to call it Tech, UST. So now it's KNUST, but in our time we call it UST. Did civil engineering there. It was a difficult time because that's the time that I lost my dad as well.
Yeah.
First year, that's when I lost my dad, and it was very tough. But by the grace of God, of course, in those days, university education was not as tough as now. Yeah. You even be given food stamps, what we used to call Bangla. Oh,
that's when your short is.
Yeah, that's the funeral.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see some of my friends. This was the Osu Cemetery. Can you imagine? The last time I went there, the place is full. So this was the time. This was the final resting place, and as a young man in 1982.
But yeah. as a family, have you had closure? Do you as a human being, as a person,
it was a tough.
Do you still have? Do you say? Some people say, for me, growing up.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you listen to commentary, and for some, the reason why you had such an abrasive posturing towards the government of the day. This is pre-2000.
That's right.
Probably because of, what had happened.
I would say maybe, of course, you cannot deny that totally. There must be an overhang. But I think by God's grace, I handled myself quite well. Because growing up was tough. The way the family was treated was very shabby. We were thrown out of our rich residence within 3 months. Even the official car, my father's official car that we thought would be left with my mother to use, was taken away from her. And we didn't have anywhere to turn to. She had to move to North Kaneshie, Swan Lake, to stay with a friend. The kids were small. There were a lot of kids. My father had a lot of kids, so... but those of us who were a bit old, like myself, I was 20 years at the time, first-year student, and then my brother Kofi, who was also about 17, 18, we had to hustle and find our way around. So it was very tough, but I think that God being so good, we've been able to deal with it. And a lot of the kids have now blossomed. We have all the young girls have become PhD holders. Rosemary is a lecturer, Dr. Kwabena Agyepong in Texas. Lucy just returned from Leeds. She's also now the Dean of Engineering at Academic Citi, Dr. Lucy Agyepong. Yeah. She was barely 3 months when my father died. She never got to see my dad. She was very sad, So, and Kofi is a lawyer in the UK. The bigger Kofi too is still in the UK. At the time, some of us were given the option to leave the country. It was very tough, So, but it lit a certain spark in me that I have to fight for the restoration of democracy and make sure that we see to it that military dictatorship is defeated for once, and then we get what we have now. So these days when I hear the young ones who didn't live through those difficult, heady days of the revolution, with all the difficulties we face as a country, talk about coups and that, I always feel I'm duty-bound to issue them a small caution.
But you look back at, say for 91, 92, 93, when there was that clamor for democracy to come back. Those of you who were on the other side doing Dankwabuzia clubs, trying to form the new patriotic party, you sit back as that young person who saw what the likes of Darocha, Stephen Kirku, Ajini Mboati, and the rest envisaged, and you look at the kind of democracy that we have now.
Well, I myself, as I said, it lit a spark in me, and so I was very much in the forefront during the days of the Dankwabuzia Club. I remember in those days it was difficult even to organize a place for people to come and speak up. And that was the time when Justice Annan, who was then head of the National Commission for Democracy, was soliciting views for the return to democracy. The Iron Curtain had fallen in Europe. The Cold War was virtually over. There was a general drive towards democratic governance around the world, and there was pressure building in this country. And I quite remember one afternoon when we needed to go and have some of our political leaders come and speak at YMCA, where the SU building. It used to be a small SU building. Now there's a big tower block seated there by the Shell station, which used to be owned by former Kotoko chairman Mr. Yaubehua.
He just passed on.
That's right, he just recently passed on. And those days, I mean, even the tough elders were scared to go and rent the place. I, as a young civil engineer working at Ghana Highway Authority at the time, I had to go and rent the place with my name, so that we could go and arrange the chairs for the likes of Nyaho Tamaklo, Kwame Mpianim, and many others to come and speak, Professor Dubois, C. Pratt, and the rest. And we were moving from Accra to other places, Tema, and all that.
And those were the days of the real culture of silence.
That's right.
As a young person in a public institution,
that's right.
You had no fear for putting your name out there to be engaged in what would have been termed anti-government conduct in those days.
It was very tough. I quite remember when I was co-opted onto the publicity committee of Dubois campaign. This was chaired by Jacob Echibilamte at the time, and I quite remember having a meeting at Dr. Kwame Safodu's house in East Legon. Today it's a bustling business bank lane, but it was all bush in those days. And the cameraman, the one controlling the camera was Harun Atta, who used to be editor of
Daily
Statesman at the time.
Okay.
At the time. Then Kweku Poku, and that's when I was, recording some of the first party political broadcasts for the NPP. It was difficult even to get people to sacrifice to sit on national television. There was only one network, and we still were under military dictatorship. So you had to be courageous, and you prepare to sacrifice to be able to say you are going to be the face of the NPP or the face of the campaign to support the Dubois.
And that's Professor
Dubois, and I was behind him at that time. So as a young political activist, it was tough. In those days, when you do the party political broadcast, and the next morning I go to the Hall of Technology, which is where I used to work, Ghana Highway Authority, Hall of Technology, AESL, that's where I used to work. That's my head office, although my department was at LWAC, Materials Division, where I was a quality control engineer. Some of the big men, when they see you, they run away. I mean, they don't want to come close to you. Because it was tough, and even worse when we lost the election. There's the military leader that you tried to garner support against, has eventually won what we felt was a badly run election. We refer to it as a non-election, and wrote the stolen verdict, subsequently. And you go to work, and sometimes you feel that this is going to be your progression as an engineer in this public space is going to be tough. But eventually I left. Not that I was under any pressure, but I just felt, look, I have to leave. And so as a young man, I set up a private consulting firm with my colleague just across here, 54 Jones Nelson Road in Adabraka. So that's where I started my engineering consulting.
This area hits close to home.
Oh, yeah. So it was a tough journey. And of course, after the 1992 election, which we boycotted the parliamentary election. In those days, the elections were not held at the same time. I've heard one or two people trying to canvass for that, return to that, to have a presidential election before a parliamentary. I don't subscribe to that school of thought. And of course, those elections were tough. We decided that we would not participate in the parliamentary election to send a strong signal to the world community that the NPP was not happy with how the elections were conducted. It wasn't transparent at all. There was no way of guarding the whole process. Polling stations were occupied by commandos, and results were just delivered to us at the Independence Square. And they set up this huge billboard with the fire tenders. Someone sitting in the fire tender just writing with the figures.
Opaque ballot boxes.
You had no chance those days. And I quite remember the famous K2 South result that came in, and all of us realized that we were in trouble. So it was tough. That was the shock that we had, because the support that we were able to generate. I quite remember during some of the party political broadcasts, I used to say that the NPP support, the people following Professor Dubois, and this is genuine support. Rather, the NDC candidate is rented crowds and using state power and coercion. And I quite remember a senior colleague I was doing football commentary with Edward Fachi. He used to nickname me Genuine Support after that. So it was a tough time. It was a really tough time, and Ghanaians have lived through a lot. there was curfew for several years. Nightlife in this country was collapsed. A lot of people had to run out of this country. Some died in penury. Businesses were shut.
So for you, in a democracy in this kind from which some argue is not working, in no way should it be a substitute?
No, not at all. I think our generation has a duty to tell the oncoming generations that this 30 years of this democracy is 10 times better than a military dictatorship. But nobody should ever dream about a coup.
You would agree with me that increasingly the confidence, and many surveys prove it. The recent Afrobarometer, for instance, an example, that confidence in the political classes is waning. And
that is true.
That's all you need to spark some form of,
Well, let's not even talk about a spark. And I want to encourage you in the media, let's not even go there. This is look, this situation is much, much better. There are shortcomings, there are difficulties, and as political leaders and politicians, maybe it's time, once in a generation, thinking should shift. We should have generational leaders, who will be thinking about the following generations and revive the interest of Ghanaians in political authority and have a vision that will inspire confidence in the Ghanaian people. Because I think politics is about service to the public. And it means exactly that. There's a general loss of confidence, as you said. I watched the program that discussed these Afrobarometer surveys, results, and I know that we are not at breaking point yet. It's important that we use this next few years to restore the confidence of the Ghanaian in politics. And it's absolutely vital that those of us, the younger ones, be able to reassure the Ghanaian population they are decent-minded Ghanaian people who are capable of leading us through this process. So we shouldn't completely give it up. There's a lot of despondency, people lacking faith and belief. I think the general population, it may be understandable, but the intelligentsia and the middle class should rally around and make sure that this Ghana works. And it can work. It should work.
All right. On that note, we'll take a break. When I come back, there's still more to discover about the man, Kwabena Agyepong. Welcome back. This is still the point of view. I still have in studio Kwabena Agyepong is my guest. We're having a general discussion about his life and tapping into his expertise about the country and, of course, what lies ahead of this country from the perspective of someone who's been at that level, top level, for quite some time. Kwabena, let's look at your time, first taste of office in government. That would be under President Kufuor, when we had the opportunity to see you as the person, leading government communications, as the press secretary to the president. I sometimes sit down, for instance, wondering how it must have been like for a party that had been in opposition for 30 years.
That's right.
Takes office with President Kufuor, with all the issues that transpired before that election, was able to rally everyone. I'm talking about the Concordia affair and all of those things, and how the party was able to rally around. And then he started government. Sometimes you think about what was it like behind the scenes for some of the critical decisions, for instance, HEPIC to have been taken. Well, and then you are the person who has to lead that kind of conversation. You've gone too far in front. Because right from the 1990s, the early 1990s, after the loss of that election, and when our chairman then, B.J. Darocha, had a press conference that we were prepared to do business with the then government, the party set up what we call shadow cabinet positions, because we were not in cabinet. And some of us, the young ones, were mentored. I, for instance, myself, Kwabena Agyepong, and Ajari Koilabi, we were like the deputies to Dr. Kwame Donkofocho, who was going to be the minister if Edubuayin had been the
the winner of that election. Don Kofojo was going to be the Minister of Mines and Natural Resources.
Oh.
And we were his two deputies. Ajay Kwelabi ended up, he's passed some time ago. He was a Kropon MP, and myself. And so we had a lot of meetings, and I was played a major role in IPAC, Inter-Party Advisory.
Which you did for a very long time.
Yes, Inter-Party Advisory Committee. So there was constant preparation. So 1996 was a much, I would say, more transparent process. Well, we still hadn't even gotten to the point where we were using photo IDs. We were still using the thumbprint. You know, mind you, in 1992, we used an old register. Rawlings would not allow us to reopen the register. So a lot of our supporters really were not on the register. By 1996, it's another election. Rawlings won again, and that was the election that was, the result was delayed for the longest during this Fourth Republic, I think 5 days. And Mr. Kufuor led for a significant period. And in those days, you couldn't even have agents in some of the regions. There were no-go areas for the NPP. And that's when the name World Bank was coined. I quite remember that was the first time we were having the strong room at the Electoral Commission, and I was part of the team at the Electoral Commission. The likes of Kwesi Pratt were representing the Nkrumah's parties. Buzitando, Chichu, Poku.
This is from the election 2000.
This is when I was the lead agent for the 2000 election. But before then, we had our primary of 1998. And I had the Sunyani primary, where I was virtually the lead campaigner for now President Akufo-Addo during his first attempt at the presidency in 1998. I mean, the likes of myself, Victor Ohini Newman, who recently passed away, Brigadier Nunu Mensah, and the three MPs. The
same Brigadier Nunu Mensah?
Yes, Brigadier Nunu Mensah. He had stood as a parliamentary candidate in a Futu for the NPP, lost narrowly to Mike Hammer, I think. You know, and then in 98, we all decided to support Akufo-Addo. We thought he was sharper, hotter. We needed a sharper, hotter candidate to defeat Rawlings' NDC. And there were three MPs, and I always want to refer to them because in those days, you know, in Ghana in politics, people like to move with the wind. And Kufuor then had just lost an election. He was the very tough, not, I would say, the figure who everybody expected to win, you know. But they had the courage, the likes of Crunchy, who was the MP for Joaso. He was former Ashanti Regional Secretary. And then Christine Checha, Cape Coast. And then Yao Benin Dako, MP for Atiwa. These were the three MPs that really
came out of their way
to support
the
six of us who were the bulwark of Akufo-Addo's campaign in 1998. And we lost in Sunyani to Kufuor. Eventually he became president. Yeah. But he recognized the work that some of us did. And that's why he made me his press secretary. In fact, before then, I was his lead agent, as you can see, at the Electoral Commission in 2000. I would say I have the privilege to have called him and informed him that, Mr. Kufuor, you are now elected as president-elect.
And there was nothing like you did not support me during the primaries. This talk about a certain
in those
faction
days,
in the NPP broken into certain two and a certain, I mean.
That is something that didn't used to be the case with the NPP in the past.
So it's a recent construct?
It didn't used to be the case with the NPP in the past. You know, because after Dubois' victory, all of us rallied behind Professor Dubois. You would never say this is Dr. Selby's man or Dr. Safuedu's man or J. Kufuor's man. Again in 1996. You know, and so therefore, once Kufuor won in Sunyani, we all rallied behind him. And nobody saw me as an Akufo-Addo person, so you cannot support Kufuor. In fact, in the 2000 election, I was like the de facto director of communications, putting together our media strategy, doing a lot of the interviews, doing the calls on the media space, and making sure placing adverts and that kind of stuff. All that, I virtually ran that part under Jacob Lamte, who was the campaign manager at the time. That's how young guys like Pius Ajide, who was a student at Legon, we had to draft him to come and do the airway advert. That's how, you know, the Tescon people were mobilized to the Volta region, because we were, from 1996, we realized that we couldn't get proper representation at the polling stations in the Volta region. And so the party put together a training scheme which We all played a major role, moved around the country, trained our party agents on the electoral processes. So when Mr. Kufuor became the president, I mean, he honored me with the position of press secretary to president.
How did you receive that? Tell us, how did you receive that information?
Oh well, I mean, I was happy.
Invited to the castle, then. How did it happen?
No, at that time we hadn't even gone to the castle.
Okay.
People have forgotten that the castle was still under renovation. Yeah. So we were at the State House.
Okay.
And that's when he called me and said he wants me to be by him, you know, and be with him virtually 24/7, be the voice and the face of his government. And so I became the press secretary to President Kufuor for close to 6 years. You know, and it was a tough time. Of course, when you are the face, and at that time there was now the beginning of the pluralism in the media space. A lot of stations were coming up, Joy FM, Gold, Groove, and many others. So sometimes you are called in the morning and you have to do interviews about 6, 7, 8, 9 stations in the morning. So later on in life, we decided to have the press briefing at the presidency, so that we assembled the presidential press corps, and then I can address them. So that improved the process, you know, of dissemination of information. But of course, when you are the presidency or in government, things can happen. So they can be very tough times.
How was it like working with President Kufuor?
Oh, he was a very nice person. The side that I regret not being able to record him, maybe in those days we didn't have that idea. Yeah. But he was so good with jokes, you know. When you are traveling with the president, he would tell you the best jokes, the history of the country, when he was in prison at Asha Fort, on what kind of bed he was sleeping on after the Buzia overthrow. And he would tell you so many historical stories. And I wished I could have recorded those things and had a documentary for people to know who Kufuor was. Because we tend to see him as he's a very serious person, gentle giant. But that side of him, many people don't know. But those of us who are close to him, he tells you the best story, he says.
Okay. I always want, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers would want to know, how, for instance, a government gets to take a decision like, say, decide to go HIPIC, which you can maybe equate to now the decision government has taken to go onto an IMF program. And of course, as press secretary, you would have to lead communication on that matter, whether you personally think it's the best decision or not. Collective responsibility.
I mean,
tell us the backstory about HIPIC.
Well, not HIPIC, and the backstory was that it was his personal decision. Yeah. I mean, a lot of his cabinet and even the economic management team were not on side with him on that.
Wow.
Yeah, that one I know. And so he said, look, let's be true to ourselves. We are in a bit of a bother. We are not able, if we are not careful, we'll be in a spot of bother, so let's take this decision. And so he did that. And I think, on hindsight, it was a very good and prudent decision that he took. But as press secretary, you are giving orders. Sometimes you can have a little chit-chat with your boss, but he will override you. Yeah. I mean, I quite remember when he was extracting some of the ministries out of transport, and because of my background as a civil engineer, a little bit of discomfort with that, having railways separate, ports and harbors separate, aviation separate. And I was beginning to have a look at him. We can't have this. Should be transport, should be one. But of course, he's the boss, so you have to do what he says. But those were times that I didn't really agree with that. But that's, you have to do the job.
Interesting. All right. So then, 2007, we decided to leave government, throw your hat in as one of the youngest.
I was the youngest at the time. I was the youngest aspirant out of the 17. Yeah.
What informed that decision, especially at a point where many contend that there was a fight for the soul of the party?
Well, it was a very different atmosphere, of course, because of what happened in '98. Yeah. Then candidate Akufo, then foreign minister, was the overwhelming favorite, and you had Alan Shamatin also posing, a significant challenge, and there was Vice President Aliyu, and quite a lot of us then in the picture. I felt that I needed to make a statement. I was anchored in the belief and the vision of Busia. And that's what I communicated during the conference, when I was given the opportunity to address the conference. I felt that Busia's decision of 1969 to blood a lot of youngsters at the same time helped the party, because despite the hiatus that we had for over 30 years, you know, the likes of KGO Sebonsu, Harune Seku, J.H. Mensah, they were all young at the time when he was Minister of Finance at 39 years. You know, and J. Kufuor himself, then Deputy Minister Stephen Kreku, and many others, you know. And because they were there at that young age and studying the likes of Victor Usu and Kwame Safodu was the minister and all that, by the time of 1991-92, most of them were in their 50s and strong enough to resuscitate the NPP. And so I felt at the time that if the delegates will invest authority in a young 45-year-old Kwabena Agyepong, perhaps I would do what Busia did and have a new crop of young people to lead our country, head in a different direction.
Did the government actually support a candidate at the time?
Well, there were always rumors of that, and there were senior members of our party who were critical of the president at the time because they felt. But President Kufuor was not overly or outwardly out there supporting.
Not all people were fired because of not wanting to.
Well, I had left my position as press secretary at the time, so I wouldn't be able to tell you the full details. But as a candidate, I am as a candidate myself, and going around all the 230 constituencies and interacting with our party in those days. It was only 10 delegates, the executives in the constituency, so there were not that many. You know, it's not now that we have about 200,000. It's a expanded electoral college, you know, so it's a bit more testing and a bit more difficult to reach. So, but again, of course, those concerns were there. People raised it, but at the end of the day, the party always decides, and our party has a knack and time-honored traditions that they will look for people who were there, who have been there, and who've sacrificed and who've actually served the party, and that's what happened. And I always believe that should be the case.
You look at that experience, and then you look at currently, where in the run-up to the 2024 elections, people say similar scenarios playing. Of course, there's an NPP president who is exiting, just like President Kufuor is exiting. Yeah. There will obviously be a tussle for power. I mean, tussle may not be the right word, but looking at the fact that, or against the backdrop that you just have new set of executives coming into office, we've heard from the grapevine that you may be throwing your hat in the ring once again. Any lessons from that, from the 2008 period?
I think there should
going forward into this particular.
I've had reason to say that it's important that we provide a very enabling environment that is free and fair, and we allow the electorate to choose what they want. Okay. When that happens, the party more likely remains united, and everybody throws their weight behind the eventual winner. When there's not a feel that there's some official coercion. And I think, unfortunately, there are a few signs of that happening, which is not too good. It happened even before the national elections, when some of the regional chairmen openly, against the party's own laid-down regulations, campaigned for the incumbent, which is something that the Constitution, the party's regulations do not support. Because, you know, when you're a chairman of a party, you are a father figure. When you are a senior member of the party, you're supposed to be a father figure. All of us have a vote. Everybody will have a preference. But because you can never tell what the party will do or the electorate will decide, it's always dangerous to come out openly and say you are supporting one candidate or the other. Because when that candidate loses and all you present that, it creates a distortion in the minds of the electorate. And it doesn't work for the cohesion and the harmony of the political party. So that's why, especially senior party officers, in fact, members of parliament, are not encouraged to do so. Definitely they will have a vote. Yeah. They would have a preference. They can even accompany candidates around without openly saying that this bloc is supporting one candidate. I think it's not a very healthy practice, and the result of the national election was an egg in the faces of some of the regional officers, and I think they should learn from that. I'm happy that the new General Secretary has made the correct noises, saying that as leaders of the party, they should be neutral, provide environment for a clean election, and let the people decide.
But that test would come with the presidential, with the presidential.
It's
already you have people.
It's already
you have some of the
Yeah. I've seen some videos doing the rounds the last couple of days, and I wasn't too happy with it, But I hope that at the national executive level, when we go to meet, we've had a new steering committee. I'm sure they will call National Executive Committee. Fortunately, as a former General Secretary, I will be there. And I think we would like to encourage everybody that, look, we as a democratic party, we always believe in competition and allow those who are interested in becoming the flag bearers to go and do the hard work. I've said, and I'll repeat it, I don't think this party allows for a coronation. There shall be no coronation in the NPP. If you have to win, you have to earn it the hard way. Go around the country, dirty yourself, hit the dust, go and talk to the 200,000 polling station executives. They are the owners of the party. The power is in their bosom, and they will decide who they want based on the kind of information you're going to relay to them. They will imbibe it, weigh it on their own scales, and decide on the day of election who they prefer. Once that happens, and there's a general feel that this has been nice, everybody is given a fair crack of the whip, it allows for unity and commonness of purpose so that we can have a drive forward. Any sign of division and people feeling apathetic because somebody is being given an unfair advantage, that is not good. And that's why when I see some executives being ferried to the Jubilee House to pay courtesy calls on the vice president, that is not very good. They can go and pay a courtesy call on the president. He's the president. And when you go and visit the president, you want to go and visit the vice, that is fine. That's okay. But when you don't see any pictures of their meetings with the president, and it's only the images of their meetings with the vice president being presented, what kind of image are you trying to imprint on the minds of Ghanaians on your electorate? You shouldn't do that. You see, right is right, and we should be capable of telling it as it is, as political leaders, and take on issues that we think can disturb our progression as a political party. And if we want to win the election in 2024, the world is already a difficult place economically, as you've said. And so we need a lot of harmony to rejuvenate the base of the party, get that animation that is required, and the enthusiasm of our grassroots and the soldiers to go out there and campaign and win the election. I'm always confident that this our NPP has more core party supporters than any other political party. Of course, we need to reach out to the neutrals and even across board. But if your base is rallied and they are motivated, then you give yourself an opportunity to win.
Okay. On that note, we'll take a break. When I come back, we'll have a final moment with Kwabena Agyepong. Stay with us.
And Guamo, with all the great delights.
You're welcome back. This is still the point of view. Duke Manso for sitting in for your regular host, Bernard Koku. I still have Kwabena Agyepong in studio. Kwabena, we've had a conversation about the perilous times you've had with the New Patriotic Party. I mean, being there, we didn't even have time to talk about the Young Executives Forum and all of that. Yeah. Has the NPP been fair to you?
I'm sure you're talking about the suspension of 2015. I deliberately sent you guys my response to the charges that were leveled. I think my response was very clear. In my heart of hearts, I don't think I did anything wrong deserving of that kind of sanction. I've been very clear on that. Fortunately for us, we are in power for 6 years. The government of the day, the party of the day, has custody of all the intelligence, information, and everything. Nobody has provided a shred of evidence, okay, especially concerning the very vicious and malicious propaganda that was churned about me in this country. And we all know that. And I think that in this life, and especially when you want to be upright and strong and honest, you come under a lot of persecution. And I think I was persecuted because some people felt I was being too tough, being too strong. And I believe parties should be strong. We need to have a strong party.
The man you're supposed to be working against is someone you virtually led this charge in
that's right.
In 1990. So what could be the motivation of those behind what they wanted you out of the way?
Only they will be able to answer that. That's why I never understood those accusations that I didn't want Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo to become president. When some of us were risking our lives leading his campaign when he was not the favorite, where were they? They were living in this country. Where were they? Those of us who sacrificed our youth, my engineering growth and everything to support him in 1998, you know. So to become general secretary of a party, which places you in a position of responsibility. And this is a party I've served with all my life, selflessly, sacrificed for the party when times were tough. You are not worried about the official reasons, which was that I had rejected an NEC decision, the NEC decision to suspend the chairman of the party, Paul Afoko. That was the officials one. The more damaging and wicked and vile propaganda was to say that I was a sellout to the NDC. How could that be possible? Somebody whose father died under the watch of the revolution at the time. If I'm going to sell my party, I'll sell it to that party. Even the mere thought of it is offensive, you know. But this is the kind of propaganda that some people engaged in to try and damage my life, my career. But God being so good, I know God has taken good care of me. And I've always felt that it is important as a people, the glee with which we enjoy the distraction of others is something that we should try and debase as a country. We should return to our cherished values of service, sacrifice, and selflessness to support the country, to build our country. That is the only way we can project this country and propel us to the country that we want, desire.
We saw you at the forefront of campaigning in the 2020 elections.
That's right.
And you went to certain constituencies. You are told you even adopted certain constituencies and all of that. What's your relationship with the president?
This question has been asked several times.
Yes.
In fact, even in 2016, yeah, in 2016, yeah, sorry, I think that little issue with the chair, is it?
Yes, we're good now,
Yeah, sorry. I mean, in 2020, the president himself called and invited me to accompany him during his campaign, and I joined him because I've always been a servant of this party. I love my party, and whatever contribution I could make to support his re-election, I was going to do it, despite all the things that had been said about me, which I know the good people of this country and the good people of our party didn't believe those things, because I know that they know the kind of service I've given to this political party from time immemorial. My disappointment, as you said, was that a lot of these seniors of our party are people who have known me, have known my character, have known my contribution from a Dubois time. And so for them to look on quietly and acquiesce to the kinds of things that were said about me, and that was what I found a very low point.
For many, if you missed out on any high level, I mean, for someone with your experience, you could easily pass for anything from roads minister to sports minister to everything.
Yeah.
And first, I mean, of course, people may say in the first term there were certain issues, but now that you're reinstated, people saw your contribution in the campaign. Do you feel slighted in any way that you don't have any role to play in the Akufo-Addo administration as we speak?
First and foremost, my life is not fashioned by the position that I occupy.
Okay.
I am a true servant of the party, and you can serve this country in many ways. Of course, over the last 4 years, I served my alma mater, or my profession, as the executive director of Ghana Institution of Engineering. Yes, and I think that is a way to also to serve your country. You can do that. Everything doesn't have to be political positions. And I want people to know that, because other than that, the tendency in the politics of this country is for people to do whatever is possible to attain political position. The whole thing about politics, the centrality of it, is the welfare of the Ghanaian, especially the less developed, the underprivileged in society, the underserved populations of our country. And our commitment to have leadership of passion, of compassion, and of courage, and of competence, absolutely vital. You can serve in any facet of society. what I see, which is worrying, is this clamor for political positioning. Okay? Especially when the focus is not about delivery of service to the Ghanaians.
Okay.
That is very vital. And so the time has come for us to have a new era, a new direction, new ideas in the way we run our country, in the way we position politics, for people to recognize that political activity is driven towards the welfare of the Ghanaian people. That's absolutely vital. That is what should drive what we do, not just ingratiating myself that I'm a minister of so and so. No. I've had the opportunity. I've been press secretary to the president, and I served with my heart. You understand? I'm not one who is interested in materialism. Of course, as I told you, those are values I got from my dad and the early leaders of our party in 1992. Leaders who were prepared to give their everything to the party. And some of them even died before we came into office in 2000. The likes of Coleman Payton never saw power. You understand? Despite all the sacrifices they had made for this political party, J.A. Addison, many of them, Kwesi Lamte, they were prepared to give their all to this political tradition. And I think we need to teach the younger generation something about nationalism and patriotism. It's very important. And so that they should be fired to serve a country, not because of what they will get out of it, but what they can give to the country. That is what I think we should bequeath to the following generations. That's why we need generational thinkers and leaders. And it's not just mere talk. I have lived it as press secretary to the president. As press secretary, as the rank of a minister of state. You understand? And of course, I didn't engage in all the kinds of things that people talk about politicians. I wasn't interested in that. I had my career as a consultant civil engineer before I went to become press secretary to the president. So the house I live in, I built it with a sweat from my consulting practice. And that's where I still live. I didn't need to add on to my real estate. And this is something that we have to inculcate in the younger generation.
So, politics of virtue. But you should obviously be interested.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about this new direction.
That's right.
And the vehicle that will take Ghana to that new direction obviously will be the NPP. Would you want to be the one in the driving seat, leading the NPP in leading this country into that direction? Are you interested in running?
I'm someone who wants to respect the regulations of our party. But today I want to make it clear. As soon as the party allows for nominations to be filed for the flag bearership of the party, I would file.
Wow.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. Kwabena Agyepong is going to run to be presidential candidate, flag bearer for the New Patriotic Party in the 2024 elections.
Duke, you wanted this as a break for you, huh?
It's important. Very, 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 very.
Because I've been asked everywhere, and I think that the party has rules and regulations, and we don't need to jump the gun. And when the time comes, I'm sure it will be very soon, because according to our constitution, by December of next year, we should have a new presidential candidate in place, and I'm sure the process will start very soon. And if I see the agitation from the base of the party, the youth especially, who feel warmed by the messages I'm being giving them, and my message has resonated positively across the country. And they see in me the hope for the future of our political tradition, because I've been there from day one. Schooled in this party, worked under all the leaders of this political party. And then I've worked for this country as a civil engineer, working in the bushes on various roads, Voradep roads, Sukuma Johnson, Jasi Canberra, Nyasi, as a young engineer, Kumasi Kintapo Tamale, Obuasi, Anyuan Kwanta, Yamransa, and all those things. Being in Asim Fusu, Asim also, as part of the mobile maintenance unit, living in the bush, working as a civil engineer. So I know the country. I feel the pulse of the people of our country. And I have their empathy because of what I've been through. And I see the daily drudgery of the Ghanaian people. I think there's an opportunity to change that narrative. And it can be done. Just that we have to cut our coat according to the cloth that we have. It's absolutely vital that we look at what we do with the money that we have. We cannot start spending what we do not have. And that is the problem that we face as a country.
Okay. Thank you very much. So that's Kwabena Agyepong. I wish we had time to talk about a passion we both share. We're both Kotoko supporters.
Oh, you are Kotoko?
Yes. Full blood.
Our great club.
Our great club, yes. So that's our show. I had Kwabena Agyepong in the studio. My name is Duke Mensopo. Sitting for your regular host, Bernard Kwabena. Keep watching Citi TV for the very best in programming.
The Point of View is brought to you by Cowbell Coffee. Cowbell Coffee. Taste it, love it. South Africa Tourism. South Africa Tourism. Inspiring new ways.